That's how love is. It's a powerful weapon. It can work for us or against us, can't it? I don't understand much about love. That's because you're a scientist. Love defies reason. Nothing defies reason.
The principle of sufficient reason, or PSR, is the principle that every fact has an explanation of why any fact is the case rather than not. We can see the plausibility of the PSR at work, for example, in the experimental method. We assume that an experiment can be repeated, and that if the same experiment yields different results, there must be some difference in the experiments. If we did not rely on the PSR, we would have to admit that identical experiments could yield different results for no reason at all. But that is surely absurd. There would have to be a reason why any experimental results are different rather than the same. And just as there must be an explanation here for why the experimental results are so and not otherwise, so too there must be, according to the PSR, an explanation for why any fact is so and not otherwise. For explanations, if they are to be thoroughly intelligible, must guarantee or entail the facts they explain. While the example I just gave of how the experimental method uses the PSR is perhaps fairly unradical, the PSR does yield some very radical and interesting conclusions. One such conclusion is that the PSR proves a very strong form of determinism, a view also known as necessitarianism. This is the view that every fact is metaphysically necessary, or in other words, that there is no such thing as metaphysical contingency. To see this, that is, to see that the PSR proves such a strong form of determinism, consider the following argument. Suppose for reductio ad absurdum that there is a big conjunction of all contingent facts. I'll call this the BCCF. And so, the BCCF is itself a contingent fact. For instance, according to the standard view of contingency, the Statue of Liberty is contingent, because the statue's being built happened but could have been otherwise. It could have failed to be built even though the Statue of Liberty was in fact built. Accordingly, the fact of the Statue of Liberty is not necessary, and is therefore contingent. Second, what more can be said about this BCCF, this big contingent conjunctive fact? The BCCF is the total collection of all contingent facts, every single one, logically and theoretically formed into one giant superfact, as it were. As such, the BCCF, it should be said, includes no necessary facts, such as the fact that 2 plus 2 is 4. Now, to continue the argument, every fact has an explanation. Therefore, from 1 and 2, the BCCF has an explanation. If the BCCF has an explanation, then the explanation of the BCCF is either contingent or necessary. Therefore, from 3 and 4, the explanation of the BCCF is either contingent or necessary. If the explanation of the BCCF is contingent, then the BCCF explains itself. Let's pause here. Why would the BCCF explain itself if its explanation is contingent? Well, that's because the explanation, itself a contingent fact, would have to already be a member of the BCCF, which, by definition, includes all contingent facts. But no contingent fact explains itself. I take it as obvious that it would be absurd if contingent facts like the Statue of Liberty, which may or may not be the case, could explain themselves. Therefore, from 6 and 7, the explanation of the BCCF is not contingent. Therefore, from 5 and 8, the explanation of the BCCF is necessary. If the explanation of the BCCF is necessary, then the BCCF is necessary. Premise 10 is true because, firstly, by the PSR, whatever is explained by a fact is guaranteed, entailed, or, in other words, necessitated. Secondly, it's a basic principle of modal logic that whatever is entailed by something necessary is itself necessary. Therefore, If whatever explains the BCCF is necessary, it thereby makes the BCCF itself also necessary. Thus premise 10 holds. Therefore, from 9 and 10, the BCCF is necessary. Therefore, from 1 and 11, the BCCF is both contingent and necessary, that is, both contingent and not contingent, which is absurd. Therefore, from 1 through 12, our supposition for reductio, premise 1, is false. There is no BCCF. Therefore, from 13, there are no contingent facts. That is, there are only necessary facts. And of course, the conclusion that there are no contingent facts, or that every fact is necessary, is simply to say that a very strong version of determinism is true, also known as necessitarianism, as proved by the PSR. It follows not only that all facts are metaphysically necessary, but equivalently that every truth is a metaphysically necessary truth, or that the actual world is the only metaphysically possible world. The argument just given, however, is rather technical. The main idea of the argument can also be presented in a simpler, less rigorous form as follows. We know that the PSR implies that every explanation guarantees the fact it explains, but this is just to say, in other words, that there is an explanation why every fact is so and not otherwise. Therefore, from 1, there are no facts that are so and can be otherwise. But if there are contingent facts, then there are facts that are so and can be otherwise. Therefore, from 2 and 3 it follows, there are no contingent facts, that is, there are only necessary facts. Hence, again, we have the conclusion of a very strong form of determinism, also known as necessitarianism, as proved by the PSR. Given the arguments we've just seen, the standard notion of contingency is refuted on the basis of PSR. The notion that things can be otherwise than they are, as the PSR proves, is absurd. Indeed, many of history's greatest philosophers and defenders of PSR have recognized this absurdity. It's for such reason that Leibniz, for example, has said, if you take contingent as that which happens in such a way that no reason for any kind, or of any kind, can be given why it should have happened thus rather than otherwise, then I think that such contingency is confused. It is for similar reasons that Spinoza has concluded that nothing in the universe is contingent, and that it is of the nature of reason to regard things as necessary, not contingent.